Dump Tuesday, where comedy meets tragedy and silver linings are turned into comedy gold. I'm your host, Priscilla Goose. In this week's Trauma Dump Report, Iranian authorities have accused the U.S. of multiple missile strikes to Iranian infrastructure. On the opening day of the war, February 28, 2026, a U.S. missile strike hit Shajara Tayyebe Elementary School as the U.S. shamelessly took the lives of 110 children. I hear if they obliterate just 2 more schools, that they'll qualify to win a dozen Krispy Kreme donuts and this month's McDonald's toy. J.D. Vance keistering a hot dog. Trump blames Iran for the missile strike, stating, "In my opinion, based on what I've seen, that was done by Iran," which makes about as much sense as the semi-truck driver that T-boned my car telling the police officer that I drove sideways into him, just before conveniently losing his dash cam footage. Lawmakers begged the question of the involvement of AI in missile strikes, asking, if artificial intelligence is used, is it subject to human review, and at what point? Was artificial intelligence included in the use of the 7 smart system used to identify the Shajara Tayyebe school as the target? If so, did a human verify the accuracy of this target? In other words, when in doubt, blame the robots. Now that we're getting AI involved in our foreign military disputes, we can officially say that we're in one of those robots versus alien sci-fis, except the robots are AI and the aliens are jihadists. According to official Iranian government figures, as of mid-April, at least over 3,000 Iranians, including over 500 women, have been killed since U.S. and Israeli strikes began, nearly half of them being the murder of innocent civilians, using military tactics that are akin to the 2000s hit by Shaggy. It wasn't me. They caught the U.S. bombing a school. They caught the U.S. bombing a hospital. They even caught them on camera. Trump's response to the devastation of taking away the lives of innocent children was that mistakes were made and that war is nasty. And sadly, that portion is not satire, as this is a direct quote from our current president, Donald Trump. In other words, oopsie daisies. Donald Trump did, however, publicly condemn the IDF's conduct, saying that too many people have been killed. But analysts suspect that the number of deaths will never actually truly be known, because just like with the last guy I dated, we'll never know the true body count. In last week's Trauma Dump Report, we learned about the US-Iran peace deal that was formally signed in Geneva, Switzerland on June 19, 2026. That would mean the immediate reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. But on June 20th, 2026, Iran threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz after continued attacks from Israel and Lebanon, and a social media post written by Donald Trump threatening to hit Iran really hard, which is, again, a direct quote and not satire. In order to prevent the immediate closing of the Strait of Hormuz due to the airstrikes in Lebanon, the U.S. Treasury issued a temporary 60-day sanctions waiver allowing the production, sale, and delivery of Iranian oil, directly funding Iran's central bank. In last week's Trauma Dump Report, we also learned that Israel argues any monetary gain made by Iran would go directly into carrying out the missions of Iranian terrorist organizations. And as all of my fellow North Americans know, there's nothing the United States loves more than negotiating with terrorists. Iran and the U.S. disagree over whether or not the Strait of Hormuz is currently open. And while the U.S. argues that Iran does not control the Strait of Hormuz, the safety and security of shipping companies crossing the strait is highly compromised. Similarly to how Trump believes women do not control their own bodies, Trump says you can just grab them by the port bow. Now that quote was satire. As shipping companies are faced with travel challenges imposed by Iran officials, the U.S. is making traveling a cinch for the Iranian team competing in the World Cup, loosening their travel restrictions and allowing them an extra day to rest in a hotel before their game commences. So while international diplomacy is hard, finding a hotel with proper Wi-Fi amongst filthy American infidels is easy, all thanks to Trivago. Speaking of us dirty American infidels, some voters have been pushing back on the SAVE Act legislation requiring voters to have proper identification, which in my opinion is pretty understandable considering that You need an ID just to get a Costco card. But voters who oppose the act are also understandable, as voter fraud is extremely rare, and elections have been rigged since the 19th century. The bill was first introduced in 2024, and a high-profile debate began over the bill in May of 2026. Stand up in the comments where you stand on the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act, and let your opinions be known, because in the traumatic times we're living, your voice matters more than ever. Always remember to fuck the system before it fucks you. I've been your host, Priscilla Goose. Thank you for joining me for the 5th episode of Trauma Dump Tuesday. I can't wait to see you next week with a brand new Trauma Dump report.